Welcome to this edition of Out of Curiosity with me, Jason Velasco, your host. Today, I have a special guest and a person I've been really looking forward to speaking to for a very long time, the Data Diva herself, Debbie Reynolds. Hi, Debbie. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on your show, Jason. It was great.
Well, thank you for participating, and I have been really looking forward to speaking with you for the last few months because data privacy is something that's very near to dear my heart, and I know you, being the data diva, have been really focused on that area and have really created some amazing materials on your podcast and your written materials, and I've seen some of you on presentations. So, for those, look, I just encourage everyone to follow Debbie. She's got some great information out there. But let's dig into Debbie, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get to the step to being the data diva?
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you again for having me on your show. So, I'm a data person. When I was going to leave college, I was planning on going to law school. My mother was diagnosed with cancer then, and I wanted to find something I could do and spend time with her. So I
Hmm.
decided I would buy a computer, teach myself how to use it, and I started doing. Back then, it was called desktop publishing. Now it's called like graphic design. So I did that. And that's really how I started doing computer stuff. And then I ended up working with university libraries to do digital transformation when they were moving from card catalogs to databases. And then from that, I got started doing some consulting with law firms and other companies looking to create databases of legal documents, and that took me to working, having teams of technology people working on data around the world. So I just got um, really deeply entrenched in the kind of data flows and the way the data, the way you have to constrain or try to constrain data for different reasons. And as I started doing that, a lot of people, and with the fact that these data privacy laws were starting to heat up, especially in Europe, people
Hmm.
started contacting me directly from companies that knew me, in the past from different other things about privacy. So one of the probably the bigger coming out things that I had was a woman from McDonald's Corporation asked me to come talk to their corporate legal department about GDPR, and this is
Mm.
before it came out. And then PBS called me in 2018 to explain it on TV, which is great. And so, yeah, so then I've been off to the races since there. So I have my own advisory company. I work with a lot with companies that are doing not only digital transformation, but a lot of times emerging technology stuff where they're developing things that may not even have privacy laws yet that apply to them. So to help them navigate that and be able to also sell their product around the world in different places. And of course, as you know, I do a lot of speaking and writing on data privacy topics.
That's cool, and I love the fact that you and I have kind of come from that same. I see you have you went to the amazing Loyola University in Chicago, like I did and it's in philosophy, which to me I have a history degree, so which is of course a perfect career path for those that want to go into data privacy and data management. But it sounds like very similar to me. What I heard was you know data is very chaotic and there's structure. I mean, part of it is creating structure and organization, and you can somewhat tame that beast a little bit. Is that kind of how you see it?
Yeah, definitely. Data to me is like water. So it's like you're trying to put water in a box. So it's hard to really contain it. And so that's the challenge. And then data flows, uh, regardless of what you use data for, there are ways in which you have to try to either stop certain data from flowing in a certain way or start it flowing in a certain way. So, regardless of industry, people, data people, like I like to call myself, we're very entrenched in that. And so, for me, it's cool because I get to talk with people in all types of industries about what their data flows are and how to, help them improve their businesses.
So tell me a little bit about the Tell me a little bit about your approach to dealing with data privacy, because I mean because it's very different talking to someone in the U.S. versus talking to someone from Switzerland, right? My partner Jason Thompson, who's based in Switzerland, he's been at the forefront of this GDPR stuff. How do you break down those two particular groups of people that are still learning, like we are in the United States, around what really data privacy really is?
Yeah, good question. I love Switzerland, by the way. So I work with companies all over the world. I have a lot of clients in Europe as well. And so probably the biggest difference I would say between the US and the EU and other countries, the way they think about privacy is that privacy in the EU or the European countries is a human right, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where privacy in the US is articulated more as a consumer right. So um, if you're, let's say you take a picture of you and your grandma and you put the picture on Facebook and she says she doesn't want her picture on Facebook, she has no redress or recourse really because she's not a customer of Facebook. So that's a big difference. Where in the EU she would because she is a human, right? And her privacy rights are human rights. So it's not just the customer right. So I think there's a huge difference in that. And I also tell people in Europe, in my opinion, feel about privacy the way that we in the US feel about freedom of speech. So very fervent, feeling about that is deeply entrenched, for a lot of different reasons in the EU. So I think when I'm talking, it's funny because I have EU people, they say they like to talk to me because I really understand those differences
Mm-hmm.
and how it's not the same. Sorry.
Well, so tell me a little about that, because I mean, I think that's something that a lot of times people in the United States aren't sensitive to that European perspective, and again, having worked with Europeans and understand that. What how would you describe that? I guess like I'm a content owner. It's like, hey, it's my data. I can mine it and do whatever the heck I want with it, right? I can monetize that. That's my objective. That's the American dream. So, how do you advise me if when I want to start tapping into the European market on why would grandma not want to have her
Yeah.
picture up on my platform?
Well, she doesn't have to give you a reason. That's a human right. So that's a cradle to grave right that people have in the EU that's enshrined in their constitution that's been codified in laws for over 50, 60 years, more than that, since
Hmm.
1953, I believe. Privacy was written as a human right. So this is before computers or the way people use computers now or the way people use data now. And so they've been very forthright about creating regulations that sort of use that privacy as a fundamental human right as a foundation. So us in the US, probably the biggest privacy fundamental right we have is in the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which is against unreasonable search and seizure, from the government. So there's a lot that's not covered in unreasonable search and seizure, and then we have things like Patriot Act. It's not about privacy, right? It's about security and what the government can do with data if they deem it, they need it for some other type of investigation. And then we have federal laws about sector specific things about like health, finance, stuff like that. Children online, that's probably a bigger one. And then we have all these consumer laws. So stuff like what's happening in California with their Privacy Rights Act and the CCPA and CPRA. Virginia just passed a law. All 50 states have data breach notification laws that are different. We have Illinois has a really big law about biometric data. So it's a patchwork in the US, and unfortunately there are a lot of gaps that aren't covered because we aren't thinking about privacy right now in a human fashion. We're thinking about it as a consumer thing.
Right.
So it's like, if I give you my data, then all these rights kick in. But what if I don't want to give anybody my data? Like, what's protecting me? It's really, there's not a good answer for that right now.
So you opened up a whole bunch of different questions for me. So first and foremost, I'm going to go to the more interesting one for me, which was, as you're talking about the United States, and you described it as a patchwork, which really is the case. And I just saw that I think the House passed today, kind of an early bipartisan privacy bill. I haven't had a chance to look at the details, but and if you have, please share with that. But how does an organization in the United States who's not used to worrying about data privacy, because again, from a worker's perspective, the laptop that I get from my U.S. employer, that data that I have on there, whether it's mine or not, is mine. I'm sorry, it's theirs, right? They can do whatever they want, even if it's private information per se. But in Europe, that's not, right? How do I, as a organization that's trying to manage people across 50 states with with this patchwork of privacy rules, how do I navigate that, and what are the first steps that I should be looking at?
Yeah, I guess one bright spot for employers is that some of this stuff doesn't apply in an employee-employer relationship. So just like you said, your laptop that you have, the communications that you have, most companies have like a reasonable use policy, something you have to sign on. And so those things aren't really subject to the privacy laws we think about because you're not a consumer, right? This is where we get back to this consumer thing again. So when you're an employee, you're not a consumer. So those consumer rights don't
Right.
apply to you. One exception to that is this Biometric Information Privacy Act law in Illinois, which is it gives individuals right for anyone who uses their biometric data, including employers. So employers are not exempted from that. But a lot of other things, again, because we're very much a consumer law type thing going on, some of those laws don't apply in the US.
Okay, so from an HR perspective, I don't have to worry about that just yet. I do have to worry about it when I have EU employees, because having worked with data privacy officers in Germany and France and Switzerland, that's not an easy issue. But
Absolutely.
let's set that aside. So I guess then, if I'm now trying to roll out that platform, and I've got technology that I'm trying to roll out, and like, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we've been really taking a close look at is patient records. We recently rolled out a vaccine management platform for a client, and that was one of the things that we try to do it, and we try to build it under HIPAA plus. But maybe if you can break that down for for the users of our listeners, in terms of what does that mean? Why is privacy in healthcare important? What are the things that people need to be aware of what their rights are, and what is a person, let's start there. What does a person know that their rights are when they sign that thing at doctors, and knowing what their HIPAA rights are and what they should be aware of?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So this is actually a bit complicated, especially when you bring in vaccines. So let's say there's a fence. Okay. So basically, there are two different warring factions of how data is handled, or what privacy rights that you have. So if you're in a patient provider situation, like you're going to the doctor, the information that you're sharing there is covered under HIPAA. HIPAA isn't a privacy law. It's a law about data portability about patients, but it has a huge section of it that talks about privacy. So when you do these transfers or whatever, this is how you protect, the person's privacy. So HIPAA is a huge law. It's a good law, federal law that covers that. The flip side, the other side of that fence, is data that is collected outside of a patient provider situation. So let's say contact tracing apps. So that's an example. So you're volunteering information to applications that are not covered by HIPAA because you're not in a patient provider situation. So that means that data has consumer protections, but it doesn't have medical protections. So when I'm talking to people assume in the US that if you're dealing with any medical information that is covered by HIPAA, and it's not. So especially things that you're giving to people, I don't know if you had this situation, but at a time when people were trying to find vaccines, when they were hard to get or whatever, they would say, sign up on this website to see if you have a vaccine. And before you could figure out whether they have vaccines or not, they'd ask you all these personal questions. And so if they weren't a medical provider, they don't have any obligation to protect that data in the same way. So a lot of people didn't sign up for stuff like that. They're like, why should I give all my stuff? You know, first of all, what I want to know is, do you have vaccines? You know, before you start asking me all these questions, and then it's not clear to me how you're going to protect this data. And then let's say I fill out everything and I decide I want to go, you know, use your service, I go somewhere else, you still have my data. So what are you going to do with it? So that's kind of a gray area.
Yeah, I saw many of those sites, and I was of course tracking with that, and and I'd start and
Mm-hmm.
never, and just look at the forms, and I was like, I had no idea where this information's going, who's gonna own it. It's my phone number. It's like,
Right.
it's like, and it's scary. And
It
so
is.
so um what would I want to do out of curiosity as a consumer that I need to be aware of? How do I protect my own rights and privacy in that type of area? And we're dealing with like healthcare and vaccination sites and contact tracing, and even like the, we'll get to vaccine passports in a minute.
Yes,
Let's start
yes.
with that.
I think you just really need to think through how you share your information and with whom. So if you feel like you can't trust, you know, an organization, then you should probably think twice about giving your data to those organizations. So like some of these vaccine sites, I had never heard of these companies. I'm like, why would I give, you know, I don't know who you are. Why would I give you this information about myself? So I was the same where I had tried to start some things and I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. So I tried to go to trusted providers. So like maybe Walgreens or Costco or something. It's like, okay, I know them, I trust them. Let me find out what they have. So that was kind of my choice. But I think people need to be aware. They need to be educated about what happens, you know, why they should share data with individuals and what they think that the company should be able to tell you through your privacy policy or whatever what they plan to do with the data. So I think you need to be a wise consumer in that way before you give your data up to people.
So that means I have to read the 60-page contract that someone flows up before I input my information. Is that the
I
safe thing to
was
do?
I think it's a good thing to do. Well, the thing is to have less stuff, right? So you should have less companies that you trust. So then when you have to read the 80 pages or whatever, it won't be that bad. So you're not reading 80 pages from 100 companies.
Right.
You know, you're reading 80 pages from maybe, you know, 10 or 20 or something.
Well, it'd be good to standardize on that, of course, if
Oh,
there was a
totally.
way to do that.
I
Is there
agree.
any vision to that, to potentially trying to come up with a standard where people can have?
There isn't, and
Can
I
you make
wish
one?
that there were. I would love to. Yeah, I totally love to. To me, a privacy policy really shouldn't be more than like a page. So you should be able to say everything you need to say in one page, and that's it. And as far as I'm concerned, so I don't think there needs to be 80 pages or anything. So
Right.
I don't think anyone's really pushing that, except the EU. In a way, they're not pushing companies to change their privacy policies in terms of length, but they are saying
Mhm.
you need to write them in plain English. So it's not the king's, you know, legalese and all this other type of stuff.
Right,
So
right, right. So what about, and I get my brain starts exploding when I start thinking about Internet of Things, and then all the metadata that's collected that can be tied back to myself and all those type of things. Um, how are you thinking about those? It's really a broad question because it really is a very complex issue. It just, what are your general thoughts, I guess, is what I'm kind of curious about.
yeah. So the Internet of Things really is the devices that we use now that have internet connectivity. Right. So that could be the thing that sweeps your house, the little robot that goes around and sweep your house. It could be your doorbell. It could be, you know, your thermostat. That's considered an IoT device. So the thing that's different with these devices is that, you know, we had just a regular room. It didn't have an internet connection, right? So it wasn't transmitting information. It wasn't collecting information about you. So these newer IoT devices, they are collecting information. And a lot of times when I ask someone how many devices they have in their house, they say, oh, I have I have a laptop, I have a cell phone. They don't say I have a thermostat that's connected to the internet. They don't say I have a smart speaker. They don't say, my smart TV is listening to me, even though all those things are happening, right?
Or
So,
your cars now. Cars are
oh,
just a big Internet of Thing too, right? And think about all the
cars,
information it's tracking around you at.
cars is out of hand. It's out of hand completely. So I'll give you an example. So someone was telling me, I don't know if you heard this thing about Clubhouse, where people were like,
Hmm.
"Oh, we shouldn't use Clubhouse because they want your contacts information or whatever." I'm like, every time you go in your car and you connect to the Bluetooth, it downloads your contacts, and guess what? A lot of that information in your car gets transmitted wirelessly to someone else that you don't even know about. So they know a lot about you based on your car. So you don't have an option to opt out of that. It will just do it by itself.
Now, is that a violation of a privacy rule that's potentially pending down the road?
It is not a current violation. It probably should be. The state of Massachusetts recently passed a law saying that people need to be able to have access to the telematics in their car, and a lot of car makers were not happy about that because obviously there are some things that happen in the car that would make no sense to you, right? So there are things about the operation of it and all this stuff, but in addition to that, the car is collecting stuff like how much you weigh, how long did you have a door open, where did you travel, all that stuff is collected in the car.
And yeah, I mean, Debbie, I don't know about you, but I get overwhelmed, just want to crawl into a box, right? Because then put a tin foil on my head and go, I just it's overwhelming. How can you reassure me, make me feel better about Data Diva, please?
I know I feel the same way. I think I'm a tinfoil hat person as well. I try to be very, you want to go into a situation with your eyes wide open, right? You want to know, is the risk worth it to me? Should I do this thing? So I had a friend, he said he was going to buy his kid a robot dog. And he said, oh, it sounds okay. And then he, read, what it does and stuff. And he's like, I don't really want this thing like listening to my kid. You know what I'm saying? So he decided not to get it. So I think the most that you can be, the most you can hope to be is an informed consumer. And then you
Hmm.
have to decide whether, is this worth the risk or not?
Yeah, I tell you, I actually made it, I made a very cognizant decision. Like, I knew that I wanted to get like a fitness tracker, and I looked at the different ones, and I kept remembering when I eventually get one of the Fitbits, plug. And I was looking at it. I was like, okay, it's connecting to my phone, which is, and I know that I know that I'm already sharing this information with but you're right. It was a cognizant decision that I decided that I was going to be able to share that information, but it was also very purposefully, I did not share my contacts with Fitbit, right?
Right.
And I was, and that's some of the things that, but it takes a lot of work, Debbie,
It's,
and that's only, and then I'm an educated consumer, right?
mm-hmm.
Can you imagine everyone in the world having to do they do that in Europe?
uh, a lot of friends I know do that in Europe. Yeah.
Hmm.
The key is, uh, the hardest thing is you giving someone your data, and then now you're trying to figure out how you can manage it once you've given it to them, which is hard. So the key is you want to choose what you give to begin with instead of trying to give everything and then try to manage it. So I think a lot of my EU friends, they limit what they give or they do it in different ways. Like I have friends, like I know someone in the US actually, they joined Clubhouse and Clubhouse wanted like their contacts, but they used a phone that had like no contacts on there.
Mm.
So you know what I'm saying? That
Yeah,
was
now
their
you're sharing.
choice.
Exactly. But you almost need to have those two devices in some cases, right? And
Oh, absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. You need an option.
you need an option. So one of the things that I hypothesize a lot on in terms of trying to deal with data privacy is the concept of tokenization and using tokenization engines to be able to track that. Can do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about that approach, and what
Sure.
are some of the things that you're seeing in the marketplace related to that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess overall, I'm in favor of any and all technologies that can help people secure data. So I'm very much in favor of anything, including tokenization. So tokenization is a way to protect data in its environment, right? So that when if someone tries to take it out of the environment, it no longer works or is no longer viable or useful or valuable. So, I really like that technology and I like any and all that are going in that way. I had a call with someone today and I try to talk to people about this castle analogy. So
What's
you
that?
have a castle and you want to protect the castle, right? So you have troops outside, you have a moat, all this other type of stuff. But the threat is inside the castle already. So what do you do then? Or what do you do? The intruder is already inside, or let's say someone breaches the gates of the castle and they get in. How do you protect the data that's inside the castle? So it can't be just the thought of the castle, like if we protect the perimeter, we're safe. You need to assume that they're in the castle, that they're if they're not in the castle already, they're going to get into the castle. And then what you need to really do is try to protect the data. So right now, unfortunately, a lot of companies, the data is defenseless in a way. So it's like once they breach the gates, they have a hard time protecting the actual data. So I am in favor of any technology that protects the data. So someone broke in. So let's say they broke in. So they broke in, they took the data. With tokenization, that data would be useless to them. It would be meaningless. So so what? They have the data, but they can't do anything with it. That's the
Right.
story that I would like to tell. So in that way, it would make it, if intruder knew that you had tokenization, they probably wouldn't bother with your company because they're like, this is too much work. There are too many other low hanging fruit folks that I can get to. So I think the idea is to try to make companies not be the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach, and I completely, have embraced it. I've been doing a lot of analysis on tokenization for years, coming out of the financial services space and just trying to figure that out, right? How do you, because you're right, someone breaks into the castle and they pick up a nut or a screw that came out of the wall. What is it going to do for them? It's like okay, great, right? They're not getting the castle. You can have the nut all day long, have it,
Right.
And I think that's something that I would love to see our industry, the data privacy, discovery, information governance industry talking more about that. I think because I think it's I'm not seeing as much innovation in tokenization as I think we really should, based on what we're seeing in the privacy world.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about encryption a lot. Encryption is a subset of cryptography. So
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see more happening under that cryptography umbrella, and tokenization is one of those things.
Well, cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. All right, so I want to get to a more of a fun thing because I'm always curious about the people that I get to talk to. And again, as a proud Chicagoan, even though I've been away from the city a very long time, you're still there.
Yep.
Now that I spend quite a bit of time in New York, and so first and foremost, Chicago style pizza or Brooklyn style pizza?
Oh my goodness. My boyfriend is from Brooklyn, so if he hears this, he's gonna go crazy. Chicago all day. So he argues about that. I'm like, don't get beat up in Chicago talking about New York pizza.
So what I get the feedback of is Chicago pizza is not really pizza; it's a casserole. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like I think there's a place for both. And so my other favorite thing to talk about when it comes to Chicago food is let's compare an Italian beef. And for those that don't know what Italian beef is, it's a very unique bar food that's to Chicago. It's basically a stewed beef that sits in a au jus sauce for 24 hours. Then you put it into a nice Italian roll. You dump it in some juice. You dump it back in the juice. You put peppers on it, and then you eat it, and it melts in your mouth. To me, it's the greatest thing in the world. But now that I've spun that, then let's compare that against a cheesesteak or a hoagie in New York or a grinder. How would you frame that out? Now, of course,
Oh my God, you can't compare Italian beef to anything. It's not like any other thing that you could have. So I go for the combo, right? So the Italian sausage with the Italian
oh,
beef, yeah, it's really
that's
good.
nice. That's
It's
nice. There's
amazing
actually
with
a
the hot
place down in
peppers.
Wall Street. Oh, the Giordano Peppers. Oh, now you're breaking my heart. Yeah, there's actually I found a Chicago style place in downtown New York. So there's one. We've got one place. So
Oh yeah.
when you come to New York, I'll definitely take you. That's for sure.
Oh cool. Oh
Uh,
cool. Yeah. So my boyfriend, he had never had an Italian beef before he came here, and he loves it now. So
well, good. Yeah, you can never go back. So
yeah.
Debbie, tell me a little bit about kind of, some of the activities you're working on. You mentioned your podcast, some of the speaking things. What are ways that people can kind of track what you're working on?
Sure. So you can always go to my website, DebbieReynoldsConsulting.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I do have a podcast. I think I have 28 episodes that have been released so far. So getting really good traction from that. It was named a top 5 data privacy podcasts out of like
That's awesome. What's
100.
the name of your podcast, Debbie?
It's called the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast. So
Awesome.
it's cool. So I talk with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know. So it's people from all types of industries, and we talk about privacy, either personal or business. So I have some really cool upcoming guests. I have a New York associate appellate court judge is going to be on pretty soon.
That's awesome.
I have, oh my God, I just have these amazing people who've contacted me, or I've contacted, and we agreed to do these interviews. So it's a lot of fun. We talk just like we do now about different privacy things, and it's very conversational. So I love for people to take a look at that. It's on all the major podcast directories.
All right. I encourage all of our listeners to, subscribe and like and definitely it's I think it's a go-to, podcast, as you mentioned, top 5. But it's also, it's just really informative and very entertaining. So thank you for doing that. And LinkedIn, as you mentioned, right, Debbie, I see your stuff on LinkedIn all day long. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
How
I
do you
like
find
to
the time?
comment.
That's what I want.
It's, I think I do less stuff on LinkedIn than people think I do. So I do, I comment obviously on people, and then I have content that comes out on a regular basis. So it's really about pacing, I think. So I try not to throw a ton of stuff at once. I try to, throw one thing and then wait and throw one thing. So it's like it's not constant, but it's a thing that happens on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's that way people always know that you're there and you've got stuff to do. It sounds like not only you're a data privacy diva, but you also are content marketing strategy expert as well. So, well, thank you very much for joining. I really enjoyed our conversation, and please, by all means, please follow Debbie's podcast, connect on her. I'm sure she's got a newsletter and a contact list. You should definitely connect with her, especially about all your data privacy issues, questions, and information that you're looking for. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this episode of Out of Curiosity. And please like and subscribe below. And looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much, Debbie.
thank you. This was wonderful.
You're welcome. Have a great day.